I'm so happy to see you here today, folks. I don't think there's a more important issue for the Metro Board and Metro Assembly of Workers, because we're down in the thick of it every day. So to see you all here interested in this topic is very important to all of us. I'm Fritz Coleman. I'm a member of the Salvation Army's Advisory Board. I am pleased to introduce our 10 o'clock session now, which is how District 3 is managing homelessness, a conversation with Los Angeles Council member Bob Blumenfield. This promises to be a fascinating case study about how the homelessness crisis is being addressed in one of our community's most vital districts, told by a local leader that is on the front lines each and every day. Really excited about this session. Please join me in welcoming Councilmember Bob Blumenfield. Here we go. And our moderator, our beloved Metro Advisory Board Chair, Andrew James.
All right. First of all, Council Member, thank you for joining us today. It's an honor. I know we had this conversation about homelessness, at lunch maybe 6 months ago, and so here we are now. So just to kick things off, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you got into public service. Sure. So first, hello everybody. Hello. It's an honor to be here with you today, and all of you who are really leaders in this field, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. So my name is Bob Blumenfield. I'm Council President Pro Tem. I am a council member. I represent the West San Fernando Valley, meaning it took me over an hour to get here this morning. And specifically areas like Reseda, Winnetka, Canoga Park, Cardana, Woodland Hills. I've served in the council now really 12 years. I'm going on my final year. I've represented the area even longer. Prior to being in the city council, I served in the state assembly for a number of years. I was the budget chair at the state assembly during some difficult times. I've done a lot of different things in my career. I've worked at the Santa Monica Mountain Conservancy. I worked for Howard Berman. I worked in Washington. I worked locally. Done some entertainment stuff. So, varied career. And I didn't think I would be focused on homelessness. When I was first elected, that was not the issue. Nobody raised homelessness as a campaign issue when I ran for city council in 2013. I mean, you should never say nobody, but hardly anybody. It really was not. It was not a crucial issue. I'm sure there was somebody to prove me wrong, somebody somewhere, maybe. But as opposed to today, where it is the number one issue. There was nobody on my staff when I started that was dedicated to homelessness. Now I have 3 people full-time on homelessness, and everybody in the office is dealing with it. And I've got policy issues on it. And now in the homelessness committee, it has become obviously one of the biggest issues of the city. But in terms of being in my background, so I represent an area also that was not also, we had the smallest percentage of the smallest number of homeless folks in the district. When I started, I think the very first time it was like 40 is what they counted. We're still in the smaller, but that doesn't mean it's not the number one issue. It just means by the numbers we don't have as many. But it is a very big issue. It is the number one issue in the district. But anyway, I could talk forever about that. I don't want to.
Well, no, I mean, you're kind of leading to my next question, which is, how would you characterize District 3? And how have you seen homelessness become more pervasive in your district?
So, the West San Fernando Valley, I mean, it is the city of Los Angeles, of course, although some folks here don't realize that the city actually goes beyond the mountains over there and have to get a passport to come to the valley and all that stuff. But it is a suburban, portion. A large chunk of the district is fairly suburban, although we do have, and I've been very active in growing the Warner Center, which is really the downtown of the valley. It's the fastest growing areas. We have some buildings with no height restriction. We do have some very urban core, and it's been growing. And we just most recently had the Rams move their headquarters to the West Valley. We have mall out there. So there's a lot happening. It's not this quiet little suburban town of yesterday. It's also very, diverse. It's not what you think of when you think of the Valley 20 years ago. It's very diverse. It's suburban but urban. And in terms of what was the other part of the question? How's homelessness changed?
How has it become more prevalent in your time in that district?
Yeah, and I said it went from being the issue that wasn't an issue to being the number one issue. In fact, and some critical elements of homelessness have sort of milestones have happened in the West Valley. For example, we broke the 311 system because of the encampments on Winnetka. Winnetka, it's a street in the district, but it gutters into Taft High School. And there was some very serious encampments there on both sides of the underpass. And you have to understand something about the West Valley in particular. We're bisected by the 101. And so there's these underpasses, and there's only an underpass every mile and a half. So those become critical corridors. And where if you're walking, and a lot of people live on one side, and then Ventura Boulevard is right on the other side. So their school is there, churches, grocery stores, so there's a lot of foot traffic. So we had Winnetka, which goes right into Taft High School, had encampments on both sides, and this created a firestorm in the community. And people were lighting up my internet. I would go out there to the site. I mean, all sorts of things. All these social media posts where, there was one that was very graphic with this old woman with a walker, because there was encampments all along the sidewalk, walking out into the busy street and almost getting hit by a car as she tries to get around the encampments through what is, the choke point of all of that activity. So that, certainly not the worst encampment in the city of Los Angeles, but we broke the 311 system because more people called in about those encampments than any other encampment for a period of time. And so it became a big issue, and I can talk about that later. And I brought Judge Carter out there. It was a focal point. It was really the touchstone for 4118. It was a number of it played a pivotal role in the sort of history of homelessness. But the other aspect of the question is, how does the district?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it kind of as a fluid part of this, obviously that was the start, and those are the things you began to see. I'm curious, as that problem became worse, you alluded to some of the ways in which you approach it. How did you begin to deal, and how are you currently dealing with what's affecting your district in that capacity?
Sure, and one of the things I've done is I've really tried to lean in and create interventions. When I started in the council, there were 0, you can count them, 0.0 interventions that the city was running. We had Salvation Army, incredible site in the district, very proud of that site. We had a few little things, but since I've been a council member, we've managed to get 9 permanent supportive housing units. We have 5 different transitional housing units. Not units, buildings. 9 PSH buildings, 5 interventions that are transitional. We have several pilot projects that are up and running. We have been creating probably more, per capita interventions than almost anywhere. And I've really been leaning in to make that happen as part of what I see as the way to deal with this issue. We've also, leaned in on that. I'm a believer, though, that I think everyone really should have a right to housing, but you also don't have a right to be anywhere you want on the sidewalk, and that can be controversial. In that, I do think we owe it to each other that nobody be on the streets and everybody have that opportunity, but we also owe it to the public to have clear streets and to have mobility, and that it's not you cannot privatize public right-of-ways. And so that's why I was a big proponent early on of 4118. People often characterize that in different ways, but I viewed that as a way to create certain critical corridors and make them. And again, when I drafted the 4118 Light, and I was the author of that was specifically for that Winnetka Avenue, because we had no other recourse of it. So part of it is leaning in on creating interventions and taking the heat. And I've taken a lot of heat from my community on creating these interventions. I could tell stories about that. Making sure people have access to services, leaning in also that I do think we need to be enforcing our rights of way, and then trying to come up with creative policies on citywide, both for creating housing, whether that's, like we're going to hear the single stair issue today in Plum Committee. I also chair the Plum Committee, whether that's my recent, looking into trying to remove certain parking restrictions so that the market decides parking rather than the government, which would also open up housing, doing things to try to create more housing, cheaper housing, faster housing, and then trying to get creative. I have some really creative interventions that I'm happy to talk about, pilot programs with Share. I was just talking to the CEO of Share over there. We've been working very closely with them to make some really creative things happen. We did an interesting pilot program, which I'm happy to talk about with Providence Hospital. Just trying to lean in, and then sometimes I try things that are too innovative and I get shut down. I had one, which I can talk about too, which was this idea of shared housing when Triple H came out. I don't want to monopolize just rambling, but it's interesting. So there was a developer in my area. I won't say his name in case he's here. He actually, we talked about this story publicly, but he was complaining about homelessness, and I said to him, well, you have all these buildings, why don't you help? And why don't you use one of your buildings for homeless? And so I said, you have new buildings opening up. I said, okay, I'll sell you a building. And I said, great, let's make this happen. So he had a luxury building in the district that was just finishing construction. And he said, I will give it to you, sell it to the city with Triple H for, less than I can get for it. Give you, it was a semi-room that was like a $14 million building that they were going to give it to the city for $9 million. It's sort of the difference was between him, his God, and IRS or whatever, however you want to do it. But the idea was to turn what was going to be a luxury building into shared housing. And my vision for it was sort of, Hollywood was Golden Girls, seniors living together. You have these great 3-4 bedroom units with granite kitchen tops. Like, okay, put a senior or two in each of those rooms. There's a lot of good benefit for that. And then for the duplexes that were in there, I was thinking Friends, have a bunch of, of transitional age youth there and use those as group housing. Because group housing should have a much bigger role than it does.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that was when Triple H was coming out. And we found a nonprofit developer to work with us. We put together this whole great proposal. My team leaned in, but it was too innovative for the Innovation Fund of Triple H because they refused to compare. They had to compare units to units, not beds to beds. So because you're never going to get a 4-bedroom unit to compare in cost to a 1-bedroom studio, it wasn't penciling out as far as Triple H was concerned. But I'm pulling my hair out because I'm like, that's because you're looking at it wrong. Because if we had the shared housing, we could have had, in this case, 52 units up and running the next day and a really good program. And instead of spending that same amount of money on a bunch of, frankly, concrete boxes. And anyway, so that was an example of something that was too innovative. It didn't pan out. He tried for 6 months, and then he finally said, Bob, I gotta lease it up. He leased it up in 2 seconds. It's on the market. It's now, luxury housing in the area. And it pains me every time I drive by.
Well, you bring up an interesting point because you've been obviously taking a lot of steps on a lot of different fronts to try to find solutions, right? But obviously you've met challenges. So I'm just taking a step back and taking a little more of a broad view because, we talk about NIMBYism, we talk about all these obstacles to progress in this fight. In your experience, what are some of the sort of overreaching obstacles that you deal with when you're trying to make things better, when you're trying to fight this fight?
Sure. Well, there's different aspects of it. Whenever you're putting in an intervention, the fear is almost always worse than the reality. And when I started putting in, I was one of the innovators on what people call tiny homes now. I still call them cabin communities. I think it's a better name. Just because cabins, they're really these cabins, and what I'm referring to is when you put these 8x8 cabins in an area, and you have a communal area for restrooms and some office areas, we refer to those as tiny homes, even though I think the tiny homes are really the ones that have the restrooms and the things in the units. But regardless, we're innovating on this. I had visited the ones before the city had any that were down in Commerce, where was it? Industry? San Bernardino and some other place. We went and did a field trip on some of these things, and I'm like, I want to bring this to the city of LA. And so we proposed, the first site we proposed was behind my office. We have a huge parking lot, was to put it there. This did not make the community happy, because it was, even though it makes sense, I mean, we're in sort of a municipal area where it's my office building with a parking lot, then the library, then the police station. The problem is, surrounding that parking lot, you have single-family home on this side, and then you have multifamily townhomes on the other side. The community went apoplectic. They protested at my house for months, and almost 6 or 8 months. My wife and kids had to move out temporarily. It got so bad. It was bad. I mean, they erected a tiny home in front of my house. They did some horrible anti-Semitic and racist things. I mean, terrible, terrible pressure. I had community meetings. I refused to meet with people outside of my home, but I always said, I will meet you and set up a meeting. You know, where I was with Hope Mission, we had this meeting, and it was really felt like at that meeting, I mean, they literally had the torches and the pitchforks that were out. And my team was very concerned about, you know, just basic safety. But we got through that. And one of the things I pledged to the community at the time, and I've held to, is I said, look, I'm not going to just have this get built in the community and then say, see it. We're going to be part of this. We're going to have cabin community committee meetings. That's what we call it. Send me in my office when I look over at her.
It's a lot of alliteration.
Yeah, a lot of, I always like alliteration. So we had these meetings, and we said, we're going to meet monthly for 6 months before this cabin, or 8 months before the cabin ever gets built, and then we're going to continue to meet until you all feel it's not necessary. And I said, and the members of this cabin community are going to be the eyes and ears of the community. And I'm not just going to self-select, people who are okay with this. We're going to take the worst critics. I hated getting these meetings, but I knew that I needed to do them because they always are, and they still are. I still do these meetings. They're always painful, but it was part of my commitment to the community to do this. And I would bring in the CEO, Ken Kraft of Hope Mission, to be part of these meetings. I would bring in the LAPD, the senior lead officer, to be part of these meetings so that the issues could be addressed, and we could separate the issues that were cabin related, that were generally police related, and we would have the appropriate folks to deal with it. And what was good about this is that we turned the fears in general into concrete issues. And some really good ideas came out of that. One of the first ideas was, well, we don't want to be seeing what's going in and out and what's happening there, so can you make the fence opaque? And so we did some research. We found out we put this sort of greenery on the fence that surrounds the parking lot, and that was a really good suggestion. So there was issues with cameras. We found the money to put the cameras on the fence and not just face in and face out. We did, and we continued to do that. And with the Reseda one at least, did that for a monthly for a year, and then after that we moved to quarterly. And now we're really almost every 6 months with them, and that one's going very well. We don't have a lot of issues. The issues that come up, we deal with them. Now, my Tarzana site, we did something similar. That has ebbed and flowed, where we have had some real issues with the community. But they know that we're doing those quarterly. That when that quarter comes up, I will be there, and I will be there with my team and with the service provider and police, and that means a lot to the folks. They realize that we're trying, and we deal with very concrete issues. And on that one, we've done things like we painted a loading zone for the business across the street. We do very practical things that they can get their head around.
So in the time that we have remaining, I would love to have you speak to your remaining time in your district, because I know that you're coming towards the end of your term. And I'm interested to know what you're hopeful to achieve in this space in your district before you leave, and what you hope for your district for your successor.
Great, thank you. Great question. I'm hoping to just completely end homelessness in the next year. But my hopes don't always match up with reality. So I'm going to lean in on the things that I can do. We have a number of permanent supportive sites that are opening. I want to make sure that they get leased up. There's always a little bit of attention. I want them leased up with folks from my interim sites. And this is often attention. You get into a problem with the way LASA works and the way the county relationship. There's a lot of big structural issues on homelessness that need to get resolved that go well beyond my district. And I really want to try to lean in on some of those. We are at an inflection point. I mean, with the county pulling out of LASA,
Right.
the city trying to decide what role LASA is going to have, whether or not, and I put motions forward to look into contracting directly with the county. I seconded the motion to look at directly with service providers, and then also trying to figure out with LASA what role will they play with us, and we are going to need to sort those things out in this next. I have about 1.25 years left in my term. My hope is that we are in this point of massive instability, and that we can get past that and get onto a trajectory to move forward. Because the other thing is that the instability we have with all of our own self-inflicted wounds with LASA and the accountability issues and the alliance case, we also have a whole other set of challenges coming us from the feds. And with the federal government about to cut back on Section 8 and put restrictions on Section 8, restrictions that we may not be able to live with.
Right.
I mean, some restrictions they're going to put on, we know about enforcement, but they've been putting on restrictions about immigration and things that we just, and what do we do at that point? And so
Right.
this next 1.5 years, I hope we can get through this chaos and be onto a more stable trajectory where we can see a future of homelessness that is brighter. Because right now we're going into what feels like a darker time.
Right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to share with us, council member. It's an honor. It's always good to see you.
It's great to see you. And I feel like we're just getting rolling. There's so much I want to say.
I know.
And on the subject, and there's just so much to do. And I guess I want to thank you and also everybody here, because while we're talking about these things, I know everyone here is leaning in on these solutions and will be part of this sort of massive restructuring that we're about to undergo. And you all could be part of that solution of how do we best get to that next trajectory.
Well said. Please join me in thanking Councilmember Butler.